Hello and good morning everyone. Thank you for joining Jade Global today for the webinar on BBB Solution with Tableau and Jade Global's Jumpstart Analytics. My name is Sangeeta Jash and I'm the Assistant Manager Marketing Communications at Jade Global and also your moderator today for this webinar. We have Dan Fleming with us today to discuss this topic in more detail. I would like to tell you a little bit about our company. Jade Global is an Oracle Platinum partner and is a leading information technology services and solutions provider. We deliver the right combination of business knowledge, product and technical expertise, project management and flexible delivery models to every engagement to ensure every client's long-term growth and success in business. For more information, please visit www.jadeglobal.com. Now I would like to introduce Dan. Dan is the Vice President of Client Services for EPM and BI at Jade Global. He's an innovative executive with over 20 years of experience in enterprise performance management, business intelligence, corporate and business unit financial planning and analysis, financial forecasting, strategic planning, technology and process improvement. I will hand it over to Dan now, who will review the agenda and continue with the presentation. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you for the introduction, Sangeeta. As she mentioned, my name is Dan Fleming, and I'm the VP of Client Services for BI and EPM at Jade Global. So I'd like to quickly review our agenda for today. So today's discussion focuses on bookings, backlog, and billings, which is commonly known as BBB. And you'll see this in many different orders: backlog, billings, bookings, bookings, backlog, billings. But there's a very specific reason I put it in this order, which we'll get into. After we have a brief primer on BBB, we'll discuss Jade Global Solution using Jumpstart Analytics and Tableau, and then we'll follow that with a solution demonstration. After the demo, we'll go over best practices in implementing the solution, and then we'll have a little time at the end for Q&A. So let's move on to the BBB primer. So this might seem a little fundamental, but I think it's important to cover some of this because as I talk to people in different companies, there's often confusion, particularly about the term backlog and what it means. So if we look at this as a cycle, there are three pieces to the puzzle, of course. The first is bookings, and that's simply when a customer places a sales order. Once that happens, that order becomes backlog. It becomes requested backlog, and the customer requests a specific delivery date. After that happens, then the factory schedules that backlog in order to determine which date is best to ship to the customer. And then finally, when the shipment occurs, a billing is generated from AR. And then finally, there are typically some revenue recognition items where dollar adjustments might be made to the billings in order to get to your overall net revenue. So let's just talk a little bit more about backlog real quickly. As I mentioned, this backlog with a request date becomes backlog with a ship date. What I often hear people say, and which leads to a little bit of confusion, is that backlog happens when an order can't be fulfilled on time. So my stance on that is that's not exactly correct. That's as correct as saying, well, a giraffe is an animal, so all animals must be a giraffe. That's not actually the case. Backlog is just simply once an order is booked before it's been shipped. So with that in mind, I just have a simple little example to kind of walk through the process. And it's simple for a reason, because in the real world, things are much more complex than this. So let's say a company opens its doors for the very first day, company XYZ, and they are lucky enough to have a sales order for $1 million placed. It's placed in period 1. The customer requests that half of the order be delivered in period 3, and then the remaining quarter in periods 4 and 5. So that's the requested backlog date. We're a new company. We're trying to figure out how we ramp up our factory and how we can level out the delivery. So we talk with that customer, and we agree to schedule the delivery in slightly different fashion than what they had originally requested, so that it's equal over 5 periods, periods 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then once we start shipping each month, that backlog turns into a shipment, which then turns into revenue. So that all looks and sounds incredibly easy. But as I mentioned, in the real world, nothing is ever really as easy as it might be in the academic world. So let's go over some of the complexities and how Jade Solution specifically addresses those complexities. So let me describe what many of you may be facing and what I've seen in the past. There's a certain footprint, and this assumes that you may have only one ERP system. Many companies have multiple ERP systems, which multiplies this by a factor of however many systems you actually have. But typical data sources for this type of information include order management, of course, your AR system, which generates your billings. As you tie things back to net revenue, that would be your GL system. And then a lot of companies in the manufacturing world deal with point of sale reports that might come from a distributor, for instance, which also has an impact on revenue recognition. And then as you incorporate forecast information, you might have yet another data source. And CRM might generate, along with your order management, some of your bookings information. So a lot of different data sources with different types of footprints. Well, that tends to spawn many different Excel files within different organizations, within different companies. Operations needs the information in order to plan their manufacturing activities. Finance needs it in order to plan their financial activities and forecast their results or expected results. And sales, of course, needs bookings information in order to hit their targets, et cetera. So every group has their own need for this information. Well, when you have all of these different Excel files, you end up with some obvious problems. There's no data integration, data inconsistencies, reporting inconsistencies, reports aren't generated timely. All of this leads to no confidence in the data. The last thing you want to do is go into a meeting as a finance person with an operations person and have dueling spreadsheets. That is quite an all too often experienced. So what we've done with our Jumpstart Analytics and Tableau is take the same data sources and build a federated data model that includes the key elements of all of these different source systems, bookings, backlog, billings, shipments, revenue, other items that you might want to include in the data source system. And then on top of that federated data model sits Tableau, which is a very flexible tool that can be used for dashboards, but even more importantly, it can be used in very powerful analytical ways by people within your organization that might have been the Excel jockeys in the past, for instance. So what I'm going to show you today, though, is the dashboarding capabilities of Tableau sitting on top of a demo database. So on to the fun part of the webinar, which is the demonstration. I have 8 dashboards. We'll spend most of the time on the dashboards that you see here on the left, because those are BBB specific. And then as you expand out the horizon of this federated data model that we have, you might include other things like revenue in the model. So let's move on to the demo. So what you see here initially is the bookings dashboard. Again, the booking is the first thing that happens. So that's why we start with a bookings dashboard. And what you have here is 2 different slices of bookings. The very top one is weekly bookings activity. If you were to have a question about any particular week, you could actually just click on that week. You would see the fundamental data that makes it up. So this is $48 million. And you can actually look to see the underlying data as well. And I know since we come from a world of Excel jockeys, the natural inclination is, well, geez, it would be great to export that, which you can do. The key thing here is you have the federated data model where you're not going to argue over one number versus the other in Excel as long as it comes directly from the system. The bottom is monthly bookings, so it's just the sum of these, but it also has a visualization where I'm including a gross margin representation, so you can anticipate how your performance is going to be in the future based on the gross margin of what you book. Now, the coding on this demo is, as you can see by this bar here in the lower right corner, we have the demo company has a target gross margin of 60%. So anything greater than 60% has greater shades of green. Anything less than 60% has greater shades of red. The good news here is this is all kind of gray, which is right in the middle, so we're right at our target margin. Interestingly, and this is aggregate for the entire company, you'll see, as you might expect, in your higher booking months, your gross margin is actually lower than in your lower booking months, because maybe you're closing that extra deal at a lower margin in order to get it done, which I can't say is a good practice, but it's a common practice. So notice on the far right corner, we have many different filters. So business unit leads to product line, leads to part family in this company. So let's look at a couple of different part families. Let's just notice all the different ones here. So let's select the first one, amplifiers. So if we look at amplifiers, you see your bookings trends. This 15th week, or the week of July 15 was a really large booking week. And you notice this business is significantly under our gross margin target, so it's red. Fortunately, the dollars are relatively small compared to the overall company numbers that we saw previously. Now, if we just randomly choose another one, let's look at discrete MOSFETs. So this is slightly green, so this is better than our target gross margin. So you get the idea here. You can search through a lot of different things and quickly interpret what's good and what's bad. And then let's quickly look at customer. Lots of customers in this demo. Let's just say we can do a search like that. Let's search for Apple. So this is Apple's bookings. And they're right around the corporate target margin. Nothing looks unusual there. If any questions were to arise, you could follow up with the appropriate planner who has the Apple product line. So that's the bookings dashboard. Now let's move on to a backlog dashboard. This one has a little bit more information in it. On the far left, you have two looks of the data of all of your existing backlog as of the time of the data refresh. And what you notice, this is why it was important to go through that BBB primer early on. What you have up front here, this is the backlog by request date. So you see when the request for this backlog was in aggregate for the entire company. Notice there's some backlog requested in November, quite a bit in April and May. And here it is by schedule date. So the factory has gone through all of the backlog and they've scheduled what they think they can schedule. And this is what the profile of that looks like. Now notice up here in the upper right, there are certain unscheduled orders. So the importance of that obviously is you need to know what the issues are that's preventing them from being scheduled, because that has a direct impact on your bottom line. Looks like we really just have one big one. So let's look at that. And you can see all of the underlying detail which is in this federated data model of ours. If there is a planner associated with it, you would have the phone number there to call them and find out what the situation is and why that's not scheduled yet. And down here, this is a visual representation of the entirety of backlog by customer. So you see that Change International is your largest backlog customer, followed by Top Image Systems, Wells Gardner. Once you get beyond your top 10 customers, there's very little other activity, even though you actually may have thousands of customers in this particular case. So let's do one thing here. On the unscheduled orders, it looks like Selectron has quite a few. So if we were to look at Selectron, obviously all of these change to reflect what the filter is. So here is Selectron's total backlog. There's 5 unscheduled orders. And here's the backlog profile, request date versus schedule date. So quite a powerful tool. So moving on to my favorite one, something I call a crawl chart dashboard. This bears a little explanation. What this is on the top is a 26-week representation of backlog and shipment activity. So we're looking at a specific scheduled quarter. So if we're in Q3 of 2012, you see historically 13 weeks before that quarter began, this was your backlog for that quarter. And you go week by week until you get to week 0. Week 0 is the beginning of that quarter. So this bar here, backlog of $153 million, represents your backlog going into Q3 that is scheduled to be delivered in Q3. And then the orange bars represent shipments. So what you'll see after week 1, you've shipped $13 million worth of product, and you have $128 million in backlog remaining. And as the quarter goes on, you're booking orders that turn in the quarter, and then by the 13th week of the quarter, which is your last week of the quarter, you only have shipments. There's no more time to have backlog to ship in that quarter. So you shipped in week 13 $385 million. This representation down below is the exact same line comparing one quarter versus another. So you can visually compare how you're doing in the current quarter versus how you were doing in prior quarters. So the current quarter is actually 2013 Q1, and notice we're in week 10 of that. So here is the numbers which ties to the sum of this bar here. Dashboards that we reviewed, you can business unit, product, and part. Let's look at, they had a lot of activity. So this is what the historic trends of weekly activity for Apple look like. And different companies, different customers have files. Some will book things with a long lead time. Others will tend to book things with a much shorter lead time, where it's more of a turns bookings business, where you may not have much visibility going into the quarter as to how much business you'll do with a given customer. Well, they're at $57 million, and in the beginning of the quarter they were at 38. So they've added about 20 million in additional orders for the quarter in this particular example. So those are the main components. Move on to some additional items that I won't spend as much time on, but this will give you an idea of how you can is the basis of what becomes revenue with certain revenue adjustments. Once you make those revenue adjustments, that fits nicely into this data model as well, so that you can actually look at revenue and analyze revenue in lots of different ways. What I'm showing you can quickly see this bubble chart shows where your biggest geography is, Malaysia, and they're gray. So they're right at your target gross margin. Singapore and the U.S. have good margins. Taiwan has some of the worst margins. That up. I could look at the underlying detail, summary level. Is aggregate in this demo. Here is your overall price per unit shipped. So you see you obviously have some mix issues here where you're going from 383 to 436 in this quarter. We're including, this is actual data here, and then this data here is actually forecast data. So again, you can pull in forecast data into this federated data model to really give you a complete look at BBB revenue, your forecast information, margin. So if you were to look at, let's take a particular part family here, let's say controllers, you see the specific P, here is your historic ASPs, and then here is what you forecast. So you can quickly judge, well, is my forecast relatively accurate? Is it reasonable? Does it pass the sniff test, or do I have to go back to my analyst who asked in the first place? Also going along with forecast, there's this forecast waterfall dashboard. I'm a big fan of this. What this does is it captures your historic forecasts. In this case, it's on a quarterly basis, and you stack them against your actuals as they come in. You can judge how well your forecasting team is doing to the actuals, and you can also understand their behavior as you approach that quarter. Does their forecast start out high when it's 4 quarters before that actual quarter hits, and then does it come down, or does it do just the opposite? So there's lots of things that you can determine here. And again, these all of these filters apply and impact everything. The gross margin is here as well reflected, so you see your forecast gross margin, your actual gross margin, and again, red, green. Semiconductors are slightly above the average. Your passive components are above the average, which is why they're a slight shade of green. 2 more quick dashboards. Move on. This is a revenue and margin product dashboard. Again, a similar visualization as to what we had before, and it incorporates all of the elements of what we've shown before. You have one big product here in this particular year, 2008. As you visually look at this while I scroll through the years, here's 2009, here's 2010, here's 2011, here's 2012. So what you witness here is a diversification of your product line. It started out with a few key contributors to your overall revenue, and as you've progressed in the years, you've successfully diversified so that you can visually see that pretty nicely there. And then last dashboard we'll show, this is revenue and margin by customer. Again, very similar to the previous one, so I won't spend much time on it. Here is your largest customer, Wells Gardner, and this is over a period of 2012 to 13. So I've removed the year slider and just let's focus on 2 years. So that wraps up the demo portion. So let's now move on to how we would implement such a thing. So we've got a methodology to implement this that's not too different from most methodologies for implementing system. You're gathering your requirements, which is pretty similar from company to company within the manufacturing realm. You design your data mart, which we've pre-developed for you. You do that development connecting to the various connectors that we need to do, and we deploy it, and it slowly evolves. The key here is really using a phased approach. If you recall the original data source diagram that I showed, there are lots of potential data sources. In order to succeed in this, you don't want to take a big bang approach. You can very easily and comfortably limit your initial data sources to order management, to AR, to a handful of systems where you're limiting your end users, and then over time you're increasing your functionality. And of course, since this is such a multi-departmental effort, it's important to have a steering committee, have everyone be enfranchised in the process, define common data definitions. It might have seemed like overkill for me to go over what backlog is in the front, but I've seen all too often where people don't quite understand the concept of what it is. And then identify how often you're going to be refreshing this data source. Typically it might be daily, some elements wouldn't be, some might be weekly. Revenue obviously would be just once a month as you reconcile revenue. And then set realistic expectations. This last bullet is a key. You know, breaking up with Excel is hard to do. Nobody ever actually does that. Excel is and always will be here. This tool and our overall solution really helps minimize the reliance on Excel and improves the quality of the data significantly. So here's what a typical rollout might be. So in phase one, you just focus on bookings, backlog, and billings. And you might have 2 data source systems, you might have 3. Order management, AR, CRM potentially. Once that is being used by your initial set of users, then you can add on to that functionality. You can incorporate adjustment factors for when you book orders that go through distributors where you know from a net revenue perspective you're going to have a 5% discount off of that, for instance. You might also include data from those distributors. So that could come from a POS system. All too often might just come from Excel from a distributor. And adjustments might be entered by the financial organization. They agree upon certain adjustments. So there's different data sources for those elements in phase 2. Phase 3, further down the road, is when you might incorporate revenue and forecast data. And again, this could come from the GL because you need to tie to your net revenue. It could come from your forecast system, wherever that might lie, and Excel as well. And then finally, the final step might be including cost and gross margin data. And bear in mind, this all is within a very secure environment, so you might not want everyone to see cost and margin data, but at an executive level, it's very important to know what that is going to be at the time of booking. So move on to some of the overall services that we offer at Jade within the BI and EPM space. On the advisory side, we offer architectural and roadmap assistance really for all BI projects. For enterprise performance management, we will evaluate tools and technology for you, and of course we'll do that end-to-end system integration. Data warehousing, which is really what our solution is part of. We provide extensive services in ETL, data model, data cleansing, which tends to be a big and often underestimated item. There are many packaged products that we implement. Hyperion on the forecasting and planning side and the consolidation side, BOPC, host analytics, OBI, apps, and DECA, quite a few different things. And then on the solution side, obviously what you've seen today is the very first one here, this Tableau, BBB, and revenue solution. And that's one bullet point because as you've seen through the demo, it actually can be one overall solution, even though it might be phased in over the course of time. Reporting and analysis, and we also offer AMS support, maintenance and support for all of these products, including Hyperion, OBI, the specific solutions we offer with Tableau, those sorts of things. All right, well, thank you everyone for taking the time, and hopefully it was time well spent for you and you have a better understanding of our overall solution with BBB.
Okay. Yeah. Jade Global is headquartered at San Jose, California, with offices in Los Angeles, New Jersey, and India. If you have any questions or want to know more about our solutions and services, then please call us on the numbers displaying on your screen right now, or you can also email us at marketing@jadeglobal.com. We will help out with any query you have, and thank you very much once again for attending this webinar, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.